right, the second part to completing the square is when we have a number in front of the x squared. So notice it's not just x squared, we have a 2. So what we want to do here is we want to divide everything by 2. And now what that's going to do is it gets rid of the 2. We got x squared. 12 divided by 2 is going to be 6x. I'm going to go ahead and leave my space here. Negative 8 divided by 2 is going to be 4. And now that eliminates that problem. And so I go into my normal routine. I'm going to put my x squared here. Half of 6 is going to be 3x. If I square 3, I get 9. And so I add 9. And then I do my GCF. So there's x plus 3 and then x plus 3. So I get x plus 3 squared equals, oh, that was a negative right there. And so negative 4 plus 9 is going to give me a 5. Now, when it asks you for vertex form, that's going to be like one of the questions in Canvas. You'll just move your 5 over, so x plus 3 squared minus 5. Now, when you get into a part next year for Math 3, you'll have to complete the square and like give an equation for a circle. This 2 will play an important role, and you'll have to factor that back in. But for now, we're just solving. So this will suffice for right now. So you'll enter this part into Canvas for vertex form. But if you try to match this, compare this to this part right here in Desmos, those 2 equations aren't going to match. So just keep that in mind. But it will work for just simply solving, okay? Now, if we go back to solving our equation, take the square root of both sides. So let's go back to solving. So then we'll get x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. Now, we can't simplify the square root of 5. We'll get x equals negative 3, because we've got to move that 3 over, plus or minus the square root of 5. And that will be our solution to it. And we can't take it any further than that. Okay, so for B, notice there's a 3 in front of the x squared. So I'm going to divide everything by 3. So I'll get x squared plus 3x. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And I'm going to go ahead and put it over here. Notice it becomes negative. Then if I do my box, I've got x squared, half of 3. Remember, half of 3, if I just put that over 2. So I have 3 over 2x, 3 over 2x. If I square that, it becomes 9 over 4. So I'm going to add 9 over 4 to both sides. All right, and so my GCF here would be x. My GCF would be 3 over 2. And then I've got x, 3 over 2, so I have x plus 3 over 2 squared. Remember, to help you with fractions, you can always use Desmos to help you out. Negative 2 plus 9/4 is 1/4. Now, the part in in Canvas, I'm going to ask you for vertex form. So what you'll do is you'll type in x plus 3 over 2 squared minus 1/4. That will be for that step. But now when we solve, you just take the square root of both sides here. We'll get x plus 3 over 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 1 is 1, square root of 2 is 2, or square root of 4 is 2. Now, they both have 2 for denominator, so I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus 1 over 2, because I can write it as one fraction. 3 becomes negative because I moved it to the other side. So I can do 2 problems now. Negative 3 minus 1 over 2. Negative 3 plus 1 over 2. So negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. And negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. All right, on C, I would divide everything by 5. So I have x squared minus 2x, I'm going to leave my gap here, equals negative 3. So I have my x squared, half of 2 is 1, so I have my x, or my negative x, and negative x. If I square 1, I get 1. So I add 1, add 1. My GCF here is x. My GCF here is negative 1. So I have x minus 1 squared equals negative 2. All right, so in Canvas, when it asks for vertex form, I would type in x minus 1 plus 2 for that part, okay? And now when I solve, I get x minus 1 equals, now, square root of negative 2, remember we got plus or minus. Negative means I pull out an I, and I have square root of 2. All I can do is move this negative 1 here over. It becomes positive, and that is my final answer. All right, on D, we know that this x needs to move over to the left side with the x squared. You can either go ahead and divide by 5, or you can move it over, however you want to do it. If I divide everything by 5, that turns into an x squared, where that right there is just going to be 6/5. And then I know if I move it over, it will be a negative 6/5. I'm going to leave my space. And that's just going to be 8/5. All right, so this one's got some fractions, but it's okay. I got x squared. Now, 6/5, if I divide it by 2, that's the same as multiplying by a half. So that's going to be 6/10. Now, 6/10 is going to reduce to 3/5. Okay, so, and that's a negative, because remember, it's a negative right there. So I've got negative 3/5 x, negative 3/5 x here in my box. If I square it, I have 9/25. So I'm adding 9/25. So my GCF is x minus 3/5, x minus 3/5. So I have x minus 3/5 squared here. And again, use Desmos. You just type in 8/5 plus 9/25, and we will get 49/25. It comes out pretty nicely because those are both perfect squares. So I have x minus 3/5 equals plus or minus, square root of 49 is 7, square root of 25 is 5. So then if I write this as one fraction, that 3 becomes positive, plus or minus 7 all over 5. I've got my two problems to work out. 3 minus 7 over 5, 3 plus 7 over 5. So 3 minus 7 is negative 4 over 5. I can't do anything else with that. And then 3 plus 7 is 10 over 5, which is 2. Okay, so this one I'm dividing everything by 2. So I have x squared. This is going to be a 1/2. Leave my space, and that becomes a 3. So I have x squared. All right, a half divided by a half, or if I multiply a half times a half, I get a 4th. So I have a 4th x and a 4th x. A 4th squared is a 16th. So I'm going to add a 16th to both sides. My GCF here is x, and then I pull out a 4th. So x, and then a 4th. So I have x plus 1/4 squared. And then 3 plus 1/16 is 49/16. Take the square root of both sides. So I have x plus 1/4 equals plus or minus 7/4. And if I subtract that 1/4, I get x equals negative 1 plus or minus 7 all over 4. I do my two problems. So negative 1 minus 7/4. Negative 1 plus 7/4. So negative 1 minus 7 is negative 8/4, which is negative 2. Negative 1 plus 7 is 6/4, which reduces to 3/2. All right, last one. I'm dividing everything by 2. So I'll get x squared. That 3 over 2, I'm going to move it to the other side, which would be a negative 3 over 2x. And then 4 over 2 is just negative 2. So I have my x squared here. All right. 3 over 2, I multiply by a half, which is going to be 3 over 4. So negative 3 over 4x and negative 3 over 4x. If I square it, I get 9 over 16. So I add 9 over 16. All right, so I have my x, and then minus 3 over 4, and then x minus 3 over 4. So x minus 3 over 4 squared, and then that's going to equal negative 23 over 16. So when I take the square root of both sides, I get x, I didn't need that parentheses there. Let's see, x minus 3 over 4 equals plus or minus. Now, the square root of a negative 23, I have to pull out an I, and I can't break down the square root of 23, it's just 23, and square root of 16 is 4. So I have x equals, when the 3 goes to the other side, it is positive, and then I have I square root of 23, and it's all over 4. And I can't break that down anymore because of that I and the square root of 23.